driving the system bottom up. So essentially, it is from school to space. We have labs in about 10,000 schools. We're adding another 50,000. Fascinating elements of stories which are happening there. We're getting ready for you, and as Sir mentioned, the workforce of tomorrow. These are the startups of today and tomorrow. At the second level, we have one of the highest number of incubators sitting with us, the Atal Incubation Mission itself. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we crossed 100. And this is where we are picking up these startups, we are picking up this AI, we are picking up new technologies, nurturing them, and trying to see how they are bringing about a real grassroots impact. You know what's interesting? Of those hundreds incubators, do I have time?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Of those 100 incubators, currently over 20 of them are in small towns and cities, and they are not looking to become a financial unicorn. These are my social unicorns. Each one of them is touching issues which are touching 1 billion lives. Not just for India, but everywhere else. And then we have the high-end ones, which are at the space, etc., which is what we work with directly. So it is actually creating this entire ecosystem, which goes from within the government, for example, creating an entity in the Ministry of Defense, which is how can we bring transformation and how can we bring technology and innovation into the government. That's a big thing. And government everywhere will be a big adopter. So how do you help the government pick up and bring that in? And we are now taking it across a number of other ministries. And similarly, we are working with the state governments to bring in similar activities. So with this entire effort is actually joining the dots and creating that web of innovation and creating that ground-up impact which you've started to beginning to see now.
Thank you. Well, happy 10th birthday. And thank you for those very concrete examples. And Sarit, we were talking before about the idea that regulation should be or can be an enabler of innovation. Tell us a little bit about the Israeli approach to productive regulation to enable critical AI innovations.
So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel with this distinguished and honorable guests, and thank you all for being here. So a few words about Israel. You might know it from other things, but I'll tell you something. A very small country and a very small market. Okay, we're 10 million people, third of only New Delhi, I think, right? So we're a small market, and we are also a country with we don't have almost any natural resources. And that leads us to be very tech dependent. Our tech sector is really crucial to our economy. And when I say that we're a small market, it's if Israel will set its own specific regulation, I assume that companies will not develop their products and services according to our regulation. When a company develop their products or services, they think about bigger markets, right? The EU, 400 million people, the US, Asia, not a market of 10 million people. And we have to be conscious about that when we set regulation on AI. So, but in the same time, we cannot also like sit on the fence and let products and service come in and that might harm safety or other public interest. So the approach Israel has taken towards the AI regulation is, first of all, we'll do it for the time being sector specific. We're not going to think about it as an horizontal regulation that covers all artificial intelligence wherever it is, but rather each sector, if it's finance, health, education, or the public sector, the government, will think about the opportunities of AI in this sector, whether the current regulation blocks it, or whether regulation doesn't give enough protection. If we'll think about finance, for example, or law enforcement, right? We have, when we do the regulation to these sectors, we have something in mind. If it's finance, we want to think about social inclusion, right? We don't want people to be deprived of credit because it's crucial for their life. And if it's law enforcement, we don't want people to risk their freedom with no justified reason. So I think the idea in Israel is, for the time being, we give regulator to control their areas in many other fields, whether it's privacy, consumer protection, so they can do it also in the field of AI. And for the time being, it's working. I'm not sure. There's also disadvantage to this approach. There can be a regulatory arbitrage when one regulator decide to take a very strict approach and one regulator decide on a very light approach. But recently in Israel, we've established an AI directorate who's supposed to harmonize the activity of each sector. So that's one thing we're doing. The second thing that we're doing in terms of regulation, so I'm a lawyer, and I perceive, like, when in my government, when I go to parliament, I think they see me with a stop sign on my head or something like that. But it's not. Like, my former boss used to say that artificial intelligence requires human trust. People have to trust it. If they'll trust it, they'll adopt it. If they'll adopt it, it will lead to wide implementation and so on. And when you think about it, when you're driving a car or when you put your money in the bank, you have trust in this institution. You think I hope so, that someone somewhere has made enough rules that your money is safe or that the car that you're driving is safe. So regulation, in a sense, is also a way to gain the public's trust. Now, I think regulation should be measured, proportionate, risk-based, but it shouldn't be perceived as a contradiction, innovation and regulation. Regulation has is much of a player in achieving innovation as much as a public investment and by the country. So this is, like, in a nutshell, our approach. We can speak afterwards on other things.
Thank you for that very clear view, and we'll definitely come back to the trust component that you mentioned. Nick, we've been hearing a lot about the role of government, but I'd also like to hear your perspective on the role of firms and firm-level governance in this story, because I think it's certainly part of the picture. How do you see firms engaging governance to really galvanize critical innovations?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya, and thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a great privilege. Tanya, when you started, you laid out kind of 3 big goals. We want kind of resilient, climate-enhancing infrastructure, energy infrastructure. We want a really dynamic, innovative economy that creates opportunities and solves problems for us. And we want really clear, safe, secure, resilient, self-determining, stable societies with a good, defense wrapper as part of all of that. And the problem is that triangle is a little bit unstable, right? When it comes to new technologies, often the Jevons paradox means the more efficient we get at delivering a service, the more emissions we produce because demand goes up. States excited about new technologies like AGI can start to worry about their geopolitical kind of relationships and get into a race mentality in technologies. We've seen that before. And when it comes to the climate resilient infrastructure versus security, often cost and alliances are relied upon to get materials flowing. And so, the point that my esteemed colleague from Israel has made is it's really important to think about what are the rules that then stop that from fracturing so that we can rely on having all 3 good things rather than just allowing us to fall into one corner of the triangle. But it's completely right, because once you have, no matter what the rules and regime is, and speaking as a lawyer, a regulation that's written down is worth absolutely nothing to industry. We know particularly from studies in areas like work health and safety, unless you have very clear signals of intent and enforcement of those rules, people will just push the boundaries of it. And Australia, like Israel, and also like India with the governance guidelines released last year, we're taking a bit of a light touch approach to this. We're saying that what should happen is each sector should be looking at technology neutral rules as much as possible. And what we're seeing in Australia is we're trying to really give life to the point that you made, which is regulation and governance is an enabler of innovation. And so it's in the interest of every business, particularly businesses with a bit of public profile, to invest in actually doing the right thing from the beginning. The one problem I see with governance, one of the key ones is organisations, as they experiment with artificial intelligence, they sometimes get caught in some of those triangular instabilities in terms of starting to race against another competitor. And if you race and you think, if you're a chief executive or you're a senior executive in a company, if someone says, I sat next to a tech person on an aeroplane or a bus and I think we should invest in AI, and that's the reason you invest in AI in your company, you are much more likely to fall foul of the regulation and the governance issues than if you say, what are the problems we're trying to solve, and then what are the processes we need to put in place to build that trust with our clients, customers, and stakeholders. And so for me, this big picture and this small picture of decision-making that all of us make within the organisations and even in our families, it's a really important link that we have to be consistent in, and policy really has to support the incentives for us to think like that throughout the stack.
Thank you. And I really want to continue on this theme of trust, which I think is already emerging as very critical to this conversation. I think one thing that it's worth acknowledging is that when we think about transitions or disruptions, they come with trade-offs. So if we think about defense and security, for example, the need for defense innovation comes with higher public spending. I know that India in the budget will be increasing its public spending on defense by about more than 15%. India is, of course, also a country of huge scale. And so I'm curious about how public trust is created in these new resilience building measures across the population. And I'd like to also just start this question by acknowledging that, you know, this event in itself is highly inclusive. People have come from all parts to be here. It's also very evident still, the G20 signs from 2023 that are very evident across the country, that was an event that was really across states and involved many, many people. So Mr. Shringla, perhaps you can tell us about how you build public trust when it comes to new resilience building measures.
Tanya, you're right. I mean, I think the word trust is very important here. And when you talk of summit like this, you know, our whole, I think, purpose of being able to host a summit of this nature is to make it as inclusive as possible, to reach out to as many people in our own country as possible. So if you notice, it's not just those of us who are involved with AI, but there's a lot of people from the public who are here at the conference venue, you know, at the exhibition. Yesterday I was at a restaurant and the waiter said, I'd like to visit the exhibition. And I was a bit surprised because I said, hello, isn't it for professionals? He said, no, my children are very keen. And then I realized that there's a public interface here, which is great. I think this is the way it should be. And G20 was similar. You know, G20 was a rare moment when we were, you know, assumed the presidency. And so I think the Prime Minister decided that instead of making it an event that was just based in the capital, that we would broad base it and take it to you know, every city, every state of our country. And as a result, I think people across the country, whether it's in you know, in Gujarat or in Nagaland or in Jammu and Kashmir or Kerala, were able to feel that they were a part of that exercise. So inclusivity is critical. I saw that the CEO of Anthropic yesterday spoke about you know, this opportunity of the AI summit to democratize AI. He said that India has the opportunity to democratize AI, to make it more effective. And I think this is what it is all about. I mean, our effort is to democratize it not only in our own country, but also across the global south. And this, I think, is, you know, your point is important, that, you know, as you invest in AI and as you invest in systems that would be, you know, important as you move ahead into the future, you know, the costs are more. And of course, public trust is important here. The public needs to be part of that exercise. I think, you know, if you look at it in one way, I think the public understands that there is a need for an investment in your public security. In other words, that you face external challenges, you face internal threats. How do you make sure that you are able to provide a secure environment for your people? How does the same technology work to your benefit, whether it's the use of drones, you know, in agriculture and farming, for field mapping, or for land zoning? You know, there's always property disputes in India, you know, because of the fact that demarcation of land holdings is not clear. We're now using drones to map it out, and AI to make sure that this particular mapping is accurate. So use of AI, I think, is critical in building the public trust. Many of us here would remember that during COVID, we had a software called convene that ensured that 2 billion vaccinations were administered to our people. We did it across the country in a very, very smooth manner, which meant that you could really take it up to scale, and at the same time you had systems that enabled everybody to be identified in a database. But imagine if AI were to be used in that, how much simpler that exercise would become. So I think, again, the public is an important part of that. They have to understand that whatever you do is for their benefit. I personally don't believe that any money should be spent without public trust and confidence. I mean, it's very important. I have to leave a little early because I have to go for a parliamentary committee that scrutinizes the budget that is now present before us. And I think it's very important to be there because I want to make sure that I'm present to see that whatever is proposed is something which is what we can live with. It's for the public interest. I mean, everything is for the public interest, but you have to make sure that every small part of that proposal lives up to that commitment. And so I think when you talk about AI, when you talk about futuristic systems, you're investing in the future. And I think for India, it's very important that we invest in the future. We must leapfrog technologies. We cannot afford to be moving in the normal way. We have already found that, in many senses, certain countries have done that and have got ahead in a way that is not always helpful or constructive. We want to be constructive players. We believe, in human-centric globalization. How do you use technology for the benefit of people across the world and in our own country? And we want to be that player, that constructive player in the global stage that can use technology, use development to help our own people and help others. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bagla, in creating a culture, let's say, of innovation and entrepreneurship across demographics in the country, how do you feel that that contributes to this development of social and economic resilience?
So the first point, we go back to inclusion and empowerment. The moment you have that, you have a greater sense of trust which comes in. But let's look at trust per se. And you're thinking of the government's role in creating that trust. Won't you think, so one is policy reflects the mood of society, right? So you need to read the mood and then create a policy around it to create that trust. Won't trust be a responsibility of every stakeholder in the system, which is every citizen, every private entity, every government entity, the government as a whole and as an individual? So it's a very collective element which happens. And now think about the ability of creating trust. So, in the Indian context, you will notice that whenever there is a challenge between innovation and regulation, I think the sense always is that we tend to tilt towards innovation. I may be wrong, sir, but I mean, we are more innovation happy, and as you're saying, we need to create the new ideas and leapfrog into new situations. But at the same time, look at the role of a policymaker. Is it to enable or is it to regulate? That's a very difficult role in the current context as we are going forward. Also because, as we discussed, disruption is happening every moment. When the core is changing, let's say you're entering into a world where everything is possible, but nothing is certain. Now, to create a structure around that scenario with creative destruction at its peak, I think one of the most challenging jobs in today's world is that of a policymaker. And the element of creating trust also comes in with a lot of other elements which are changing by the day. So from that perspective, what we are now trying to work is that the moment you have inclusion and empowerment, if every individual is empowered to see what they want is right or wrong for them, and have the ability to be included in the process, then they are a stakeholder in the process. And the moment you are a stakeholder in the process, you are a part of that trust-building effort. And I think that is where, when you're looking at a bottom-up approach and a top-down, and they all meet. So we moved away from an essentially top-down approach. It's all driven bottom-up. And that is what creates the trust, that is what creates the flexibility, that is what reflects the mood of the society, and that's what enables a collective sense of trust to get evolved. That's what we are doing.
Thank you. And I want to pick up on what you mentioned around the role of the policymaker and the idea that trust takes coordination, it takes new kinds of capacity building as well. And I think what often we're seeing across the three domains we're talking about, critical technologies, energy innovations, defense and security innovations, is that often they don't neatly fit the structures of government. And I think that this can be very, very challenging for those who are trying to think through the policy and regulatory landscape. So Sarit, I'd like to ask you about the experience in Israel of interagency cooperation, of how you see ministerial collaboration happening, and perhaps the cross-sectoral level as well. And if I can add, it would be interesting to hear about the role of the new Artificial Intelligence Directorate playing that coordinating function.
So thank you. Well, I think Israel will not be special in that sense that we work also in silos. And AI being the new, and I'll be a bit cynical now, but like the new shining toy, everybody also wants to have like a stake in it. And in these circumstances, I won't lie, it's hard to cooperate. Everyone wants to control like AI, and also in Israel, we experience lately like a political, we're not like, political instability, which means that we have like elections quite often, which makes it hard to think of long-term policies. So in that sense, we are really looking forward to this new directorate of AI, which is led by professionals who will have the opportunity to think about it long-term, how Israel wants to lead in AI in 5, 10, 15 years. I don't know if we went through 2047, but at least 10 years ahead. So I think that's one way to break the silo, and also this directorate will be located at the Prime Minister office, and I think that's also to give a sense how like the importance that Israel seeing it. Now, until now, there was, I would say, organized chaos in Israel for what what concerns AI, but I think it was also a good thing, right? Because it gave some kind of pioneer, like people on the ground, companies, they worked on AI, they tried to promote AI, and it gave us, like as government, like a period of time what we can see where the market is heading, what are the needs of Israeli companies in order to thrive in AI. So I think the directorate comes in a good momentum, not too early and not too late, and its role will be to understand where Israel has advantages, what are our disadvantages, and to allocate our resources. And resources are not just money; it's time, right? It's time of policymakers who they're like have a lot on their mind, and you have to catch like their attention for a certain moment. And it's think about regulators in the transportation or on the education. Their main role is not to encourage AI. If you're the Minister of Education, your main role is that the education system will function. You as a directorate will have to give them resources and the motivation to invest time in AI. If you're a financial regulator, it's the same. You think about your consumers, you don't think, or financial stability, you don't think necessarily about why AI is important. And I think the directorate role will to be as well to give them resources, to catch their attention, and to push them in the direction to invest in AI and to make AI part of their daily thinking. Because I think all sectors will be impacted. There's no way around it. And another thing that I want to mention regarding the directorate is, I think in Israel at least, the government is, you spoke about public spending. So our public spending in defense was always high, and in the last 3 years it's skyrocketed. So we need to think about how we make our government more efficient, and AI is a part of it. I'll give you just an example, and it also has to do with trust, right? When you think about how you can use AI, we see all these sometimes like doomsday example, right? Like incarceration. But why do we need to start there? We can start like in so many simple things that can improve our governance. I'll give you an example of in Israel. In Israel, there is a long wait for public housing. We don't have a lot of public housing, and the demand exceeds what we have to offer. Sometimes people wait 6-7 months to get an answer whether they're eligible to, and why? Because the people who ask for public housing, when I was a law student, I volunteered in a center like that. They come with a bunch of paper. They don't get into a form in the computer and put like very organized, like this is my salary, the number of kids I have. They come with a lot of paper. And until, I don't know, 6 months ago, 7 clerks took all of these papers and made like a chart of like whether they're eligible or not, and brought that to a committee. It took about 6-7 hours to sum up one request, okay? They brought AI to do this summary, right? There is a human in the loop that is looking that there were no recent mistake, and that it shortened the time of the committee to receive about 70%, okay? And I assume it will be better because the system will be better and the human in the loop will have less work. Now, it's not a risky use. All the AI is doing is making information more organized. It helps with public trust because people know that this AI works for them. And in that sense, I think building, like, the government is leading by example, that we adopt AI, we adopt it in a responsible manner, and I think that also will also help also in gaining trust, but also to show the companies or regulators the government is doing it, the government is using it. That means we are in a state where we can go to the next level with AI. So.
Thank you. Mr. Schringer, I know you have to go soon, so I'll come to you for one additional comment. I want to draw on your experience as Foreign Secretary. I think a lot of the challenges that we're talking about cross borders, we're thinking about energy, defense, critical technologies. These are national stories, but they're very much also regional. And so I'm curious to hear from you about the role of international cooperation in galvanizing the changes that you'd like to see, and in particular to think about the role of regional alliances in this picture.
Well, you have a global governance structure. You've got the United Nations, you've got the Bretton Woods institutions, you've got the WTO, but none of them are geared up for technologies that represent the future. So whether it's AI or whether it is use of say critical minerals, or whether it is any futuristic technology, how do you, as Deepak ji said, how do you regulate that space? How do you ensure that there is some level of international governance where every country has a certain responsibility? So how do you use AI responsibly? I mean, I think I fully agree about the disruptions that AI could cause. I mean, the disruptions could be in many senses. I mean, there's already concern in our country about the disruptions in terms of employment or unemployment that AI could cause, because it will make a whole lot of people redundant. On the other hand, AI could also be used in a manner that could be, socially, I would say, of concern. For example, so the social media, fake messages, fake posts, using AI, to morph and change pictures and so on and so forth. This is something that could be beyond just individuals, but it could affect societies. It could lead to incidents, it could lead to unrest. So how do you deal with that, and how do you deal with it at a global scale? Take a simple thing like cybercrime. Cybercrime today is a global, syndicated operation. Something taken from your account illegally through the means of technology is going into 60 accounts and then 600 accounts and then going into cryptocurrency, and you can't trace it. So how do you regulate crypto, for example? So I think you need another global governance, let's say, framework that can help countries across the board provide some regulation. I don't know in what sense. I think the AI Summit is a good place for a discussion of all of that, all of those concerns. And I think some work is being done by the United Nations as well. But I think it needs more than just the UN, because this is technology which is cutting edge, which is not just there but might come up in future. You need people who have a good idea, and some of our friends here are, I think, well placed to provide us with that. And Deepak quite correctly pointed out that I'm probably the only exception in this room. My only familiarity with AI is that my son deals with AI. But having said that, I think there's a lot more that we can do in terms of bringing some sort of control over this entire framework that you have, and not just nationally but internationally. So I'll stop there, and I'll also beg your indulgence to.
Sorry to come in the middle of the session. As Shri Harshvardhan Singla has to leave, so I request Saroj Bharadwaj from our team to give a memento to him.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And Nick, I know that you have both very extensive experience when it comes to international cooperation, but also a particular view on the role of perhaps the global competition narrative that's emerging. Tell us about your thoughts on this.
Yes, so the point that was made at the beginning of the session was regulation as an enabler. And certainly international coordination is also an incredible enabler of the safe and responsible use of AI systems for many reasons. But one of them is because it doesn't just lead to products and services that are more likely to be trusted, but they're actually more trustworthy, because you can move from country to country, service to service, and feel, okay, there is a standard that I'm aware of that this is based upon. At the organizational level, the kind of predominant standard in the AI space is 42001, ISO 42001, which is a management standard. So it's a standard that attaches to the use and the organization, the processes around by which you know whether what you have works and is safe. And in my mind here, on both the international level and all the way down to us using things individually, there are three big questions that I think we have to be really clear on. And this includes in work in the military domain that I've done with the Global Commission. And the first one is that it's the right tool for the job. So within an organization or across countries, this is actually going to do what it says, and it is suited to that task. And just for example, I don't use Claude or GPT-5 for most of my summarization work. I have GPT OSS running on my hard drive, and it's a much lighter, use of the thing. I don't need an internet connection, and I know how much energy it burns, right, which is directly from my battery. And choosing the right tool for a job, whether it's robotic process automation or others, is an absolute key. But the second one is the team, the group of people that are using it together. And I think this is the most under-investigated thing when it comes particularly to generative AI. We all use it individually, but at an organizational level, it's actually how teams use it together to get an outcome in a ministry, or your example of lawyers helping someone make an application. The whole process has to be adjusted, and people have to know what the system is doing. That is also true at the international level. So when groups of countries come together, and increasingly Track 2 and Track 1.5 dialogues, where these are the key people in labs and tech firms talking to each other about geopolitically sensitive questions, there has to be enough transparency about what is happening in these systems. That's probably the sticking point at the moment in terms of the international competition. But like at the very bottom level, you need to understand the trade-offs. And I think that's where sessions like this really start to think, well, what trade-offs are the most important for us to manage? And in the military realm, one of the most important ones is human agency and control over the deadliest of systems. And that's the one where a lot of focus has been at the UN level recently on military systems.
Thank you, Nick. I want to give both of our additional speakers a minute just to talk about their countries' perceptions of the role of international cooperation before I hand over to Shyam Krishnakumar for some closing remarks. Sarit, over to you.
So as I mentioned before, Israel, small market. We won't make our own unique regulations, so we are very much looking towards the world to set some standard that we can adopt, because we understand the limits of our regulation. So we are looking with anticipation for these standards to sink in. I do want to say also that sometimes I'm not a policymaker. I'm a legal advisor to policymakers. And when I have to come to Parliament, or when I have to come to meet with the minister, and I have to come with a recommendation, I look at international papers. And there are so many of them. And there's the OECD, and then the UN, and the UNESCO. And they're all very valuable, but I think we need to start narrowing it down and think what is the unique advantage of each of these papers and what we can take from them. And think how I think we are in a stage of limited resources also for these organizations, and how we make this work more collaborative, and how we can take the most out of it. Because I'm sure that Israel is not unique in that sense. We're very much looking to see these works and to learn from them and to implement them when we do our AI regulations. So that's one thing. I also want to say, even though it's not, but I'm Israeli. I can. Just because of the discussion that was here earlier, there is also so much that you can expect from regulation. It was said here, for example, disinformation and fake news. Regulation will not encourage critical thinking among the kids, right? Regulation will not explain my father why not everything in ChatGPT is true, and he will call me and to say, ChatGPT told me that, and I have to tell him that it's wrong. And regulation will not make any caution, all cautionary measures that has to do with AI. So I think you were talking about trade-off and everything, but I think also we need to think about what we do except regulation if we want to have trust in AI. And so I'll sum with that, and thank you so much again for having me.
You would have seen where global cooperation is concerned, or partnership. I think India's position is very clear. Look at our ethos. In Sanskrit, and the Prime Minister often uses it, is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, right? The world is one family for us. We are very clear. It's nothing but that. And for us, family is number one, like for all of us. And within that family, we expect everyone to cooperate. And we want to do it. So for us, cooperation is a part of our DNA. The second interesting thing is that for the first time in human history, until now, if you look at our entire history, it was defined by geographical borders. And then came nation states, etc. For the first time, we are now coming to a position where there is a new agent which doesn't understand physical boundaries or borders. That is a completely different challenge. And for us, that challenge fits in very well with us, because we, in any case, look at it as a good, big partnership family.
Thank you. We are fortunate to have partnered on this event with two organizations, with the Pranava Institute and with Archaea India. And I'd now like to turn to Shyam Krishnakumar for a short closing remark.
As we approach the closing of the session, we would like to thank Shri Deepak Baglaji for his presence and insights shared. As he's heading towards another session soon, we would like to present his memento. I invite Ms. Saroj Bharadwaj, Ms. Shefali Sham, and Pooja Banerjee from METI to present this token of appreciation to him.
Before handing over to Shyam for closing remarks, you're welcome to join us tomorrow afternoon at 3:30, where we will continue the conversation on tech diplomacy at the British Pavilion. Thank you, and over to Shyam.
Thank you, Tanya, and There's 2 minutes to go on the clock. I'm Shyam Krishna Kumar from the Pranava Institute. It was an honor